Welcome to Money and Freedom, the podcast about becoming financially free and building wealth for generations using stock market investing. Welcome back to the podcast. This is part 2 of my interview with Mar Häusler, who used to be a trader in London and went into a spiritual journey, left that job, took a sabbatical. And today she merged the two sides, the money journey, the hardcore trading journey, together with being spiritual. Last time we spoke about being a trader in London during the financial crisis. Go back, listen to that. Super, super interesting. She survived a financial Titanic. And now we're going to talk about the second part, the spiritual journey. Welcome back.
Thank you.
So what exactly happened? You took 6 months sabbatical. And where did you go? What, did you go alone? Did you go with someone? Where did you go first? And what were you thinking? What did this freedom feel like? What happened?
Yeah, so I remember actually, just as we were touching upon it now, I was on a flight to South Africa over Christmas. And, sometimes these incidences happen. I was upgraded. I was sitting next to someone. And actually, I'm going to meet him for lunch after this. He lives here in Portugal now, but he was in South Africa. And he looked at me and he's like, I think you were just in a burnout situation, we spoke the whole flight. He's an older man, but had been in business, giving advice, and he's like, maybe you can take some time out. Now in hindsight, when we speak again, he's like, I didn't think you were going to take 10 years out. But those incidences and a few nudges, like I mentioned in the last podcast about the hedge fund manager, my dad getting ill, just getting more in a spiritual journey, meditating, led me to realize that I didn't want to be in that place. So after bonuses were announced, and I really didn't feel like I was rewarded the amount I should have been, and they did pay me more after too, but I just felt like, what am I doing here? I'm giving my life away. I'm super young. And they said, okay, take a sabbatical for 6 months. And I went away. I went to see my close friends. We went skiing. And I just felt like I had freedom for once, I just started this trip. I was dating someone in Lebanon at the time. I moved there for a bit. Realized that wasn't the life I wanted to lead either.
Wait. What happened in Lebanon?
I was, before I left finance, I started dating someone who was living there. So I kind of moved there for a few months.
How did you meet him? Was he also a trader?
No, completely different life, but through a friend. He was going to Monaco. She grew up in Monaco. She was a good friend of mine from London, and I met him there. One weekend, actually, when we went to Beirut to party, I went with her to travel to party.
Oh, Beirut is so much fun. I've done that thing.
Yeah.
Rue Monroe?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, I've done it.
We went there together and then I met him and it kind of started this long distance relationship. And then I tried it out. But it wasn't exactly the life I wanted to live. Even though, we got engaged. There were many things. I've lived many chapters.
Oh my God. So wait. What about that life was not the life you wanted to live?
It was just all of a sudden he was like, you don't need to work here. And I'd gone from a working woman trading to meeting women for lunch, talking about nails and nannies. And I was like, this isn't okay for me. And there really women didn't work a lot. I mean, obviously it's a stereotype, but it was very hard for me. I was like, I really loved him at the time. I was young though, I was experiencing things. I wanted something different. And I always said to him, I wanted to travel and I wanted to do a master's in something different. And those were in the books. And I think he was so afraid of me traveling that he proposed and I couldn't say no at the time. So we entered 2 months of this. And then I just realized I needed to go traveling. And my 2 best friends, they offered me a ticket to Burning Man. And I took it. And after that, there was no coming back.
What happened at Burning Man?
I mean, I'd never been to a festival. I was super type A square, my first festival, my first dressing up, parties, my first anything to do with hallucinogenics. And it just blew my mind. I was like, there's a world outside of this.
Did you take any of those?
Yes,
drugs?
I tried everything there. It was a bit crazy. It's kind of the environment. But I realized it really opened something else up for me.
What did it open? What exactly happened?
A freedom. I felt like I was living in a box. What happened to me in London was that all my friends were getting married, buying houses, having kids. And I just thought, if this is my life, right now, I want none of that. And funnily enough, years later, now I'm living this. I have a son, I have a partner, we're living here, a much more structured life. But I feel like I had to live all this chapter in between to get to this point where now I don't question it. but I was questioning everything. You know, I wasn't ready. I was in my mid-20s. Like, I wanted to experience things. And I feel like now I'm so much more of a better mom, partner, because I don't have those urges. Like, everyone's like, I'm going to party, I'm going to travel. And I'm like, great. I mean, I've been all around the world. I've done all the parties. I've lived all these experiences. And I'm happy right now where I am. I want to build my work. You know, I want to dedicate to certain things, living by my values, but I couldn't figure out what they were until I had lived all of this. And so I went to Burning Man with my friends in a caravan, dressed whatever every single day, riding around the playa in the sand. I'd taken mushrooms and different things. And I just thought, oh my gosh, there's another world. Like, it blew my mind. And after that, I remember the head of the trading floor calling me. He said, if you don't come back, we're going to take all your money, all my deferred shares.
No.
And I just couldn't go back at the time. In hindsight, I probably should have gone back because I could have taken the deferred shares. But I remember I was so young, a bit arrogant, I would say, you know, like finally having my freedom. And I said to him on the phone, I'm like, you can take all my money, but you can't take my life. And that was it.
Oh.
And I was like,
how much money were we talking about?
Like into the millions.
Oh.
That I left on the table. And then...
So wait, so you kind of, you were so focused on money when you were working at the trading desk. And then you left it and then you rejected money. Is that the right way to put it? Like you didn't want to have anything to do with it.
Exactly. So I was like, I want to be spiritual. I ended up going to South America, trying ayahuasca for the first time on this whole journey down a rabbit hole of self-discovery. And for me, it was like spirituality. And at the time when I started, I was like, money and spirituality are not linked. And so I just gave up any material possessions I had. I gave up the whole material life. I traveled with a small backpack. I remember I ended up in India on a floor on like a 5-centimeter mattress in a horrible accommodation I was paying like $7 a night for. And I was like, I feel happy for the first time in my life. And before that, I was traveling to 5-star hotels. I was going to Saint-Tropez to party, and my friends would turn around to me and be like, you're never happy. Like, nothing was enough. And that moment in India, in the ashram, when I started the experience, I shaved my head when I got there. I did the whole cliche thing, like that you see now in movies and things. But I was there, and I was like, I'm happy. And I didn't have anything compared to what I had before.
Let's talk a little bit about that money side, that you rejected money. So you were going for 1 million, right?
Or more, yeah, exactly.
And you must have had some savings because you didn't really have time to, I mean, it sounded like you had fun as well, but that was your goal, so you must have been saving. What happened to the money side of your life? Did you just use it on your spiritual journey, or did you save some of it? Or
exactly. So I lived 10 years on that money. I traveled the whole world. I lived in communities everywhere. I invested some part of it that is still there for my retirement, so that's fine. But I spent the rest of it in these years.
And
like,
what amount are we talking here?
Into the hundreds of thousands.
Okay.
Yeah. But like, I came back and people were like, you could have bought a house. I could have done this. Yeah, maybe I could have done things differently. But now I'm like, I don't think I would swap any of this. I was young. I was in my mid-20s. Like, I had the freedom. Like, now I realize I've got kids. Even if you have that money, you can't just go, you know? And someone once said this to me. There's a book that they read. I forgot what You Die With Nothing, I think, or something. And it was exactly this. It was like, there's a certain time in your life where you can do certain things. And if you don't live those experiences at that time, it's going to be very hard to live them again. I remember I was in South America at the time. We went to Galapagos. I was on a boat cruising around. Everyone on the boat was in their 70s because they'd all retired. And they couldn't go on walks on the islands.
What a shame.
You know, and I was thinking, here I was in my mid-20s, you know, mid to late 20s, enjoying that and just thinking, you know, what would that have brought me later on? And there was a couple I remember from Israel. Both of them were professors at the university, and they were in their mid-50s, and they said to me, good on you. Like, it was just, you know, key moments that you live of people. So I traveled South America for those months after, ended up in India with a spiritual community, with a spiritual teacher who was a psychotherapist, Brazilian, awakened in Indian ashram. So we had the Vedic traditions, and also worked with plant medicine from the Amazonian forest. So brought for me like ayahuasca, psychology, and the Asian traditions together. And I ended up there for over 6 to 8 years in the community, really understanding myself. So I lived...
You were there for 6 to 8 years?
Yeah, between India and Brazil, living in the ashrams, and just doing inner work. Now, in hindsight, I always tell my clients, I'm like, you're not just going to do it to fix yourself to come back to the world. I think I went very far. I thought I was going to live there forever. I thought I was just going to meditate for the rest of my life, gave up all my material life, and really lived out of a backpack. And then I remember someone told me about something called dragon dreaming, which was a project management methodology from Australia. And I remember sitting in meditation looking online. It was like dragon dreaming. What is this? And there was one course that summer in Europe at Schumacher College that I could go to. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go to this course. I signed up and I went to the college. And I was like, what is this place? So I ended up at Schumacher College and being offered a scholarship for the next year's program, which was in regenerative economics. At the time, it was also called economics for transition.
Regenerative economics.
Yeah, so new way of economics. So regeneration is like, instead of just like sustainability, which is sustaining, it's like almost like reinvigorating our systems.
Okay.
And so it was like economics for transition, economics for a new time. And I got offered like a scholarship to join. And I remember when I finished the course, it was end of July. I went to the ashram in Brazil. It was starting on the 1st of September. I was leading a team of 21 people, taking care of the ashram and things. And I got there and I talked to an older lady and she's like, you need to go study. So I went to my spiritual teacher at the time, Prambhava, and I said, I have this opportunity to study. And he looked at me and he was like, you belong in the physical world. You need to go. And so in one day, I packed my bags. I had Havaianas, a backpack, and I left Brazil to move to the UK. No coats, nothing. It was becoming winter. And I arrived at the college a few days into the master's. Like, what was amazing for me was that I had lived so far from the reality. Like, I cut from many friends. I couldn't go to weddings anymore. I lived like a whole other life almost. But it was a time where I could dig in my past. I could understand what was going on. I could understand myself, really like what was driving me in finance, why I did certain decisions. I needed those held years. And when I got to the college, Satish Kumar is the founder of the college. He walked from India to the US with just a bowl and 5 bags of tea for the nuclear states to deliver the tea for peace. Wow. And he opened the college, and the college was run like an ashram. We'd wake up in the morning and meditate together. We'd have morning meeting. Everyone had to either cook, clean, garden, help, and then we would study. And a lot of the classes were out in nature. It was like Waldorf school for adults. I was, a child again, but most of the people arrived from the world. And I had arrived from a completely different place. So for me, it was the integration point back. And all the things I'd learned through the spiritual journey, I could give form to. I could give, substance to. There was a language for it. There was another way of thinking about economics that didn't match with my old view, because it was all profit maximizing, like making money. And this was like, there were other systems, there were other ways.
So what are these systems? Can you give some examples?
Yeah, so there's really stuff about the commons. It's about community currencies. It's about taking care of the local environment. It's not only about globalization. It's about reskilling. And that's where I got an interest in community currencies. Like, what is money? I started questioning.
Community currency. Can you explain what it is?
Yeah, so community currency is a currency that's a local currency. And for example, they set it up in Bristol. It was the Bristol pound. They set it up in Totnes, the town next to Schumacher College, the Totnes pound. They've set it up in many different places around the world as well. And the idea of this is that when you have a local currency and it's spent into the system, it circulates 3 times more than a normal pound does. So if you have the pound, you go, like, let's say to Tesco's or to a supermarket and you spend it, it goes directly out. So that makes people 3 times richer, because that euro has circulated in the hands, because money only works through circulation, right? That's the whole idea of it, the velocity of money.
Yeah, I heard you say that money is like blood in the body. It needs to circulate.
Exactly.
That is also very interesting today.
Yeah. That's that's what you can price into local currencies. Technically, money should have something called a demurrage. So after 1 or 2 years, it loses value when it sits into an account. Because the reason why money was invented was as a means of exchange. It wasn't invented as a holding of value. Now, of course, the systems have changed. We have compounded interest. There's many different things. But if you think back to what money does, if we circulate it more people get to use it. More people get rich through it. More people get to engage with it. The more money we take out of the system, the more depleted it becomes. So I always see money like okay, if you've got a bunch of money in an account that's not working, it's like a swamp. It has no goals, a swamp, like
so if you have it in savings accounts, for example.
Exactly. It's like just sitting there, it's depleting, it's not doing well. That's why I think money needs a goal, like where it goes through. It's like streams of rivers where it flows. It has a meaning to move towards it.
What do you do today? Just jumping from your studies to your life today, because today you work with coaching people around money and money mindset, correct?
Yeah, so what happened in the community was that I realized it didn't matter that we changed the notes and coins on the outside. If the individuals didn't change the way they related to money, we would have the same fears, the same scarcity, the same, like all the emotions were still coming up, the same hoarding. And so I started doing workshops within the community around your personal and emotional relationship to money. And it was called at the time, Me, Myself, and Money. So me, myself, and how I relate to money. And that's where I saw the shift happening, because I wasn't on a spiritual journey. It was all about our inner work, understanding things, but it's in relation to things. And for me, I found out there was so much charge with money. There was so many things going on. Like why were some people not spending it? Why were some people overspending? And for me, I started questioning this. So I did these workshops and I started realizing it wasn't about, we can change the notes and coins on the outside. It's like Bitcoin or like cryptocurrencies, or we had shells before. If we don't change the way we relate to it, we will have the same mechanisms, the same structures happening time and time again. And so I started going towards workshops around your personal and emotional relationship with money. So I ran these workshops all around the world, in Brazil, in the US, in Asia. I was traveling around after the community experience and after my master's, holding these workshops, Me, Myself, and Money, 1-day workshops, 3-day retreats around your personal and emotional relationship to money. Because I was like, okay, if you start investing, but you've got the same mindset behind it, you're not going to shift that. I worked with someone who had almost 100 million, was 3 times and lost it because he couldn't hold on to the money. It wasn't about the money, right? We say it so often, right? Like, it's not about the amount of money you have. It's about how you relate to it. There are people who are millionaires or billionaires I've worked with who still feel poor, And when I was in finance, I had so much more money than I had at that moment. But I felt so much more in control and like abundant than I did when I had all that cash.
When I started teaching people how to invest and invest in this, I think, really responsible way, which is called value investing, with the first cohort, I discovered very quickly that I could teach them everything. I could even show them. I was showing the first group, I was showing them, I'm buying Apple shares now. This was during the FANG dip, the end of 2018. It was like such a good time. It was such a no-brainer. None of them did it. And I was like, why didn't you invest? And, because it wasn't really about the money. It wasn't really about the investment. It was about how they felt. And then I changed the whole thing that I teach. The first thing I teach them is about your money mindset. It's like the first part of it. Because I realized people don't invest not because they cannot invest. It's not that difficult. It's because they're afraid.
Yeah.
What is it about money that makes it so emotional for people?
Well, I started realizing through doing these workshops that exactly what you said. There's all these tools in the world. It's not hard to invest nowadays. There's all these platforms. We have so much information. Why are people not doing it, right? And when I started doing more and more of this work, and because of the work I'd done in the spiritual journey, I realized there's so much more unpacking to do, especially around women, right? We haven't been in the economic system financially for so long. A lot of women, maybe your mothers or your grandmothers didn't work for money, right? Like they might have stayed at home, taken care. There's a freezing point of like, how do I deal with money? This is totally new, right? And then we're expected to know everything, but it's not in our system, in our cells, right? A lot of also, I just had a client actually the other day, I did a workshop, and she said to me, someone in my family line committed suicide in the Great Depression in the US, and I just had someone committed suicide again, close in my family, because of money.
Horrible. Yeah.
Right? And she said, I see the patterning, Of course, it's a horrible situation. She said to me, it's horrible. And I'm not, bless her, she said, I'm not thinking about suicide. That's not why I'm coming to you. But she said, I see it's in the family line. So if we've had stories, and I've seen this with so many clients, I've done this with hundreds and thousands of people now. If you have gone through war in your family, famine, right? I see it in my family, Second World War in Germany, My grandfather left China on a refugee boat to get to Singapore. It wasn't easy around money. There was scarcity. I feel that in my system, I had to do so much work to undo this for myself, right? I think we all have this inherently inside of us until we rewire this. A lot of hoarding comes from those times. A lot of the ways we think. I have clients who go to 5 different supermarkets. They don't have to get the cheapest price. We have these things. So I always say to people, realize what's going on inside of you. There's no right or wrong. There's no judgment. We all start at a different point in our money journeys. We all want to go somewhere differently. What we need to understand is what's going on and undo it for ourselves. For me, a huge thing was on this journey when I discovered it. My great-grandmother in China had bound feet. When they used to bind the feet at 2 years old. She couldn't go anywhere. She couldn't walk. So I felt like I was in a trophy position where I couldn't, at some point, as a woman myself, make my own life. I had to undo so many binds. And I think we all have lineages where things like this come through in one way or the other.
If your feet were bound on a spiritual level.
Exactly, on an energetic level, I would say. There's 2 books I always recommend to my clients. It didn't start with you and Break the Cycle. They're really around this. Epigenetics now talks about this as well. There's so much more than just us. And I think those fears come from those situations, plus stories you've been told. I remember I grew up in the 90s in the Asian crises. People were losing money, the stock market, this. And all of a sudden I'm like, these stories are there. We've all lived through this. We've all had experiences in our families or close surroundings where we've heard about investing maybe being bad or people losing this or just save. But these narratives keep going on until we rewrite them. And like you said, we can give people the tools. Why didn't people press buy? Why are we so afraid? Because there's so much more beneath it. I think we look at the tip of the iceberg. And until we can undo some of these things, we won't act differently on the outside.
Got it. You, at some point in your life, you realized that you were different from men, like in the sense that you knew it before, but you were really living in a man's world and you were doing whatever you wanted and you thought the playing field was equal. And then at some point, you had a child, you realized, it's not equal. Can you talk a little bit about women in the investing field? And I also got your point that you're saying, for many women, we're the first generation even working. I am in my line of females, and also definitely the first one investing. Talk a little bit about women and how it's actually not that equal.
Yeah, so when I had my son, I remember giving birth. And before that, I had a letter from the doctor because I was going to the World Economic Forum in Davos to give a talk. I was 7 or 8 months pregnant going there. I was really like, we're equal, we're fighting for rights. And I gave birth and I was lying in bed and I couldn't even get a glass of water. And then I was like, we're not equal. I am the one here. I was breastfeeding my son. I was doing all the things. Yes, my partner could help, but it wasn't the same. And I started having this huge vulnerability. He even says at the moment, he's like, I never saw you so vulnerable. Because I was so hard also on some level, because I was like fighting for this. And I realized, gosh, we're not equal. And I shifted. When you become a mom, stuff happens. I didn't want to go out there anymore and fight for things. I all of a sudden had a baby to take care of, all these things started happening for me. And that's also where a lot of my women's work was born from. I've always done work with women on the side as well, where I realized actually we need to cultivate that and celebrate womanhood and be with women because we're not celebrated in society. I have a whole line of ritual boxes to celebrate the rites of passage of womanhood and different things that came through this journey. I've been holding women's circles and tea ceremonies and for years. Because I realized in that time where I was fighting like a man, I'm not the same. And actually, there's something to cultivate here. And we are the only ones birthing the next generation. I'm sorry, but we can fight it as much as we want, but it's women who birth, right? And in that moment, I realized our system is not taking care of women. Okay, I'm giving birth here. I cannot go back to work right now. Yeah, okay, maybe some women push through and they can, but, I couldn't take care of certain things. All of a sudden you want to take time out and raise your child. It broke my heart in that moment to think that women had to leave their kids to work 9 to 5 in jobs they hated to do.
Imagine being a trader again and having to go back to that.
Yeah, and it just broke my heart to think, number one, you're doing something you don't want to do for money. And number two, you can't live your purpose. And for me, that was the key. I felt like I was living my purpose as a woman, really creating this work for women. That's when my work for women was born. I focused on men and women before, and I was like, I want to focus on women. Like, women need to find their purpose and make money from what they love to do and to be able to raise their children.
What does it mean for women that they are different, that it is not actually equal? What do they have to do even before becoming mothers?
Well, I think it's a plan now. I didn't think of it before like that, right? But we need to take care of investing, of setting ourselves up. Now I teach a lot of women about investing, much more from like the spiritual container. I have a female investment course, of course, but also from like understanding your plan. And there were women who were in their 20s on the course, they were setting something up, the Future Female Fund. So as a female, I could do what I want in my future. That's having kids, taking time out, but really thinking of this. No one tells us this. No one teaches us this, We have the same capacities as men do in the economic system. I really believe it. It's just a matter of breaking some cycles, But then at the same time, setting ourselves up, planning, strategizing ahead, knowing that maybe we want to take these breaks. I still think the system does not support women. Like, yes, we used to be able to get married. The woman stayed home, the man went to work, you got 50% of it. All of that's changing now. And I remember, so after I'd set up all this work for women, you know how life is. In 1 week, like 3 or 4 women contacted me. They had 3 kids, were divorcing, and had nothing. And one of them, she had a great job with Cartier in London. She left it to follow her husband to another country, take care of their 3 kids. They're separating now, and she's restarting from zero. Wow. And she said, when my older kid leaves home, of course, the money is going to reduce. What am I going to do? Another lady here in Portugal, German, 3 kids, had she handed her divorce papers in before her husband in Germany, she would have had mutterhood, like mother support, some income from what he had made, all of this. He handed them in here in Portugal before, and as you know, Portugal's like quite equal, and she gets nothing. She has to leave her kids every week to go to Germany to work because she couldn't get a job here.
How sad.
And I was like, how can women end up in situations like this where out of the love of their lives, they've given up time for their families? For me, I was like, what is this? Like modern day slavery? This is insane to me. And then I started realizing, okay, the system is currently not set up in those ways. But we need to understand what is going on for our own rights, right? It's not that you're oblivious and then you should be taken care of. No, I was like, you need to have the knowledge, the understanding to plan it, to then know what your choices are, But then I understood when motherhood came, I wanted to be with my son. I wanted to be there as a mom. Everyone's different. How do we navigate this as women? It is such unknown territory until you become a mom. And I really think investing, taking care of your finances, it's so important.
It's part of your future motherhood. One thing I was wondering about that, I feel like we see it everywhere in Disney movies and the way that women speak about themselves is this fantasy of getting rescued. Yeah. Is that something you see in your work?
I did so many workshops, and one of the themes around that is, what is your fantasy? And it's like winning the lottery, and most of it is like being rescued by a man, on a horse. Like, we have this rescuing syndrome, and a lot of the workshops that went into the father wound, having the father you didn't have. I definitely have topics around that too. I think we all have things to undig, wanting to be rescued. And until we can really take care of ourselves, it's not going to happen. And for me, it's been why I did all this spiritual work has been my inner journey of understanding it. And I went through plant medicine all the way through. I did every single healing modality from, chakra healings to Reiki, to crystals, to sound healings, to everything under the sun. And then therapy all the time, Jungian, all the way through path work. And more recently, in the last few years, I found something called internal family systems that really allowed me to start having conversations with it. And I feel like it's a journey. We all need to find our path. My spiritual teacher at some point always said, what is your phone out of the matrix? Like, what is your way to take yourself out, to really understand things? And I think that gave me my power back to realize, okay, it's me, myself in this world. We have this rescuing syndrome. A lot of women I know here I've spoken to recently, they don't know how much their husbands are earning. They're just living with that money. They have a blind eye, Yeah,
where we live in Portugal, a lot of women follow the men. So in the school, when I meet the parents, it's usually, I would say it's 1 out of every 20th couple, the woman will work. But all of them, they're following the men. So we really have this, I don't know if it's a rescuing syndrome. It's just the way that life is set up here because, most of them are entrepreneurs. But that means that the women are dependent on the men. And sometimes you hear these stories, like, where did Monica go? And this is just a name I'm making up. Oh, her husband was beating her. She had to go back to whatever country she came from. And then she became a single mom, which is not the worst thing in the world. I am a single solo mom. I decided to do this on my own, but I've got the finances in place. But you hear these stories of these women that they're so dependent on the men, and then something happens, and they're like,
Yeah, I feel like that's it. Then life nudges you, and I hear so many situations, and women manage. It's not like you don't. Like, we're resilient, we go through it. I hear amazing stories of women who were in horrible marriages and they're setting themselves up and they're learning. But does it have to be that way? That's what I always ask myself. Does it have to be so hard? Because I also think many stay longer than they should in situations because of financial dependence and lack of independence per se. I think it was even, I can't remember a feminist who said that the first thing women need to have is financial independence. And yeah, we have it harder because we're taking care of the kids. I think it was even in Denmark, a Danish friend told me, they were saying, women have so much more on their plates nowadays. They're working plus taking care of the finances, plus the kids, plus the family.
And parents probably are getting ill.
All of these things.
Sick,
like my neighbor, she earns more than a husband, and she says, who buys the milk? It's still me. Who takes care of the kids' clothes? Me,
And the project planning.
Right?
The next birthday, and whose birthday is it, and, all this stuff.
All these things, But I also feel like we are resilient and we're strong. And that's why, of course, I've gone through my own journey of the victimhood, of the rescuing. Yes, it's part of our story, but we can also rewrite this. And I love to do rituals and understanding for women because I say, at some point, it's your sovereignty and you take it. And then we rewrite our own stories. And we all have our stories. I always say we all have our traumas, our backgrounds, what we've lived through. Not one is stronger than the other. Yes, some are harder. Of course, they're all different stories. But we also have a choice. And I feel like we're given this choice in this life. And now there's so many resources out there and we can make a choice. And we're rewriting the story, not just for us, but for the future generations of women, for the future generations of our children. And it's time now. And, I think sometimes I'm so grateful for all the women who did the work before us because we're living at a time now where we have independence. It wasn't, in Japan, there's still some places where women need to bring their husbands or their brothers or their fathers to open a bank account. It's not that long ago in the US, until the 70s, where women could open up their own bank accounts. Even in the early 1900s, women, when they divorced, even though they were their assets, they went to the husband. Those things are very new. It's like the last 100 years. So we cannot expect to then think we can be completely differently from one day to the next. It's about owning that again. It's about taking our sovereignty and rewriting that story and choosing to, I think, more than anything. It's like, this is a choice we're making now. And I feel if more women can come together, if more of us can empower each other, that's why groups of women, sharing stories, understanding each other helps to make that step. But when you're alone, sometimes you're like, oh, can I do this? Oh, I'm not. And I say to it starts with 10 euros a month, 20, 30.
For investing.
Yeah, start with something. Put it aside. Take care of your life for your future.
And also, you have the power of compounding with money, but you also have the power of compounding with your knowledge. That's why it's so important to get started. Get started, doesn't matter, it's not a lot, because you learn. It's like, in the beginning, it's like, what happens if I push this button? People get so scared about it. I don't know if they think they're going to blow up an atomic bomb, like pushing that buy button. But that's something you have to learn. And that whole thing, like, oh, it's going down. That's part of powerful compounding of learning how to invest.
Yeah.
It grows. Your knowledge will grow. Your confidence in investing will grow. So important to get
I always
going.
say it's like the gym. Right? You start going, and in the beginning, you're like, oh, I don't want to lift this. And you get stronger and stronger, and you start seeing the results. And then you're like, wow. I've worked with women. She came in, she's like, I can't open up my laptop. I don't know what to do. All of a sudden, we set it all up. She was asking her husband for it. Now she's just like, look at this, and da-da-da. And she's getting excited. And I think we need to start. It's part of that journey to then move to the next step. So I think it's exciting, and the more you can get inspired by other women
that
who are doing
is
it.
going to the money gym every day now.
Exactly.
I would really like to round off with talking about what's happening today. So we've got a super volatile stock market because of the whole tariff situation and whatever Trump is doing. And that creates a lot of distrust in buying stocks and investing, and also this kind of lag attack. I find that people are really, really scared of investing today. What do you see? And how do we handle this volatility, which you are really the expert because you were on a trading desk during the financial crisis?
Yeah, so I always try to say to people, the volatility of the markets are like spring, summer, autumn, winter. If we can start seeing it like the seasons and that we know that the economy moves in cycles, we can also understand that it comes back. So we have the spring, we prepare for the summer. Sorry, it's great. We have autumn and then it's winter. And we need to prepare for recessions. We need to prepare for the downfalls. We need to know that they're there, right? There's obviously certain ways to invest, certain asset classes, certain, let's say, geographies or even demographies or, let's say just different parts of the economy. But I say when you understand that it's cyclical, when you understand it's like the seasons and it comes back, we can be prepared for it. The issue is that when we think it's winter and then we want to sell because we're so scared of it, it's when we make the biggest mistakes. And it's when I talk to women, oftentimes I say it's like dollar cost averaging, right? It's like we're never going to hit the top and we're never going to hit the bottom. And that was for me as a trader too. We always wanted to hit the top and bottom, right? You always wanted to sell at the top and buy at the bottom, but you're never going to hit that point.
So we just have to explain what dollar cost averaging is, which is when you invest the same amount at the same period. So if it's every month or every week, doesn't matter. So you decide you're going to invest 1,000 or 10,000 and you just do it every month or week. That's dollar cost averaging. Yeah.
At the same time. Doesn't matter where the market is, doesn't matter where things are, because we are human. We have emotions. And I think at some point we need to separate them, and it's not easy, right? We need to understand, okay, this is my strategy, this is what I want to do, and this is my emotions.
So I can kind of differ from the way you talk about it, that you are telling your clients to invest in ETFs, right? Because that's usually linked to dollar cost averaging.
Yeah, I don't tell them what to invest in because obviously, firstly, I don't give financial advice, but we sit down and we do a plan. And I open up all the asset classes to them. I explain all the different directions they can go. Everyone is different, right? Some people want to take more risk. Some people want to take less risk. We look at the risk perspective of them. We look at their goals, short-term versus long-term, because obviously you do make different financial and investment decisions. And then we set up like a strategy. It's almost like a dollar comes in and you know where it's going to go.
Semi-winter or winter, whatever we are, when you see that stocks dropping, you get scared, maybe you weren't prepared. How do you deal with the feeling of lag attack?
Like you said, gratitude is a huge one. I always say to people in those moments, just if you don't know what to do, don't do anything, right? Because people want to panic sell, they want to, and I'm like, just take a moment away, breathe. Like we need to find space again. It was exactly this in finance. We need to find space for that gratitude to come in, for that realization. Because when we contract, we see it in life, everything contracts with us, right? Everything does. It's like you said, the lack attack came in and then it was like, this doesn't work and that doesn't work. And then it perpetuates a spiral going downwards. And we need to stop that in that moment. And like you said, find gratitude again. Look around. What do I have? Where do I live? We can find gratitude in every single thing. I always say to clients, close your eyes, open them up in the room where you're at and just see what you have in front of you, what you've created in your life.
Just one last question. The money flow and with the regenerative money that you created, it was so important not to hoard, not to just keep your money for yourself, because the flow of money creates welfare for everyone. But what about investing? So is investing hoarding or is investing keeping the flow going?
Yeah, for me, when I look at it, investing is keeping the flow going as well. And for me, investing, there's so many choices, right? Because you put the money to work. You are supporting companies through that. You're supporting individuals through that. You're supporting different things, investing according to your values, what you believe in, and then to become conscious of it. And then when we can invest and grow our money, what are we doing with that? How can we give back? And for me, giving back is the second part of the cycle. Once we get to abundance and being able to live off what we have, how can we create things in the world that are important? It's not just about money, but it's about, I feel like, what do we create? What do we leave behind?
The why.
Exactly, of our lives. I think all of us are born with a certain purpose. I don't believe we were born to work 9 to 5 in jobs just to pay for our living. but what is it you came here to do? And oftentimes we knew that when we were very young, but we were so conditioned by the whole system, by our parents, by whatever, saying you can't make money with this, schooling. How do we undo this to get to the next stage, to then start kind of creating it? And I feel like I work downstream with women. Sometimes I'm like, we need to teach children about money.
Yeah,
you know,
it would be great to get it into the school system.
Right? If we would have known this earlier. I mean, I'm like, why did I learn about Pythagoras and all this maths that's not really helping me today, but no one told me about like budgeting and bank accounts and mortgages and taxes? I'm like, why did I not learn this?
Regenerative money.
Exactly.
The very last question, where can people find you?
So I have Instagram, Mar Häusler. I have my website, marhäuslerswell.com.
And how do you spell your last name?
So it's Mar, M-A-R, and then Häusler, H-A-U-S-L-E-R. It's actually Häusler, it's German. And then I have a YouTube channel as well. So I have resources out there. You can join my weekly newsletter. I send out my video clips on tips all around finances. And there's lots. So
thanks a lot for coming here. And if you enjoyed this podcast, obviously subscribe, like, review it on your favorite platform. Remember, you can always hit me up on Twitter or LinkedIn with my handle is my first name, B-E-I-L-E. And remember also to look up Mar and give her a like and a subscribe. Remember, none of what we said is investment advice. It's all just education and fun. So have fun out there. Please remember, what we share on Money and Freedom is for education and entertainment only. The opinions you hear from me or my guests are not investment advice. Always do your own research or speak to a professional before making any decisions.